We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you.
The 23.
Hey, what's up you guys? This is Steffi, aka In My Humble Opinion, and welcome back to another IMHO Film Club movie review. In today's video, we are going to be reviewing the new Elton John biopic entitled Rocketman. So Rocketman stars Taron Egerton, Jamie Bell, Richard Madden, Bryce Dallas Howard, Gemma Jones, Stephen McIntosh, and Charlie Rowe. The movie was directed by Dexter Fletcher, and it was also written by Lee Hall. So Rocketman is the biopic jukebox musical about Elton John's life. It's a biopic not necessarily concerned with the facts, but more so focused on the emotional journey and truth of Elton John. And before I begin this review, I just want to quickly say, one, there are going to be spoilers, believe it or not, even though this is a biopic. There's spoilers. And two, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not the biggest Elton John stan. I'm definitely a casual fan, but I'm not a stan. Like, I don't know his life like that. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. So just letting you know. So as in all my movie reviews, I'm gonna be talking about the pros, the cons, and then I'm gonna give my overall rating at the very end. So here we go. Alright, so the pros. First pro for me about this movie is Taron Egerton's performance. A lot of people have been raving about how great of a job he does portraying Elton John, and I'd have to echo those people as well because I definitely think he did a great job playing him. I don't necessarily know Elton John's specific mannerisms, but to me, the casual fan, I feel like he did a good job portraying him. It didn't really feel like an impression of Elton John in any way, but more so it felt like he was just portraying a character. Something also that I felt like Taron Egerton did really well in this movie is he just brought a lot of energy, especially in the musical numbers. He does a lot of his own singing and dancing, and even though he doesn't really sound like Elton John, I actually appreciate that he kind of made those songs his own, but still was maintaining the essence of the songs themselves, and I just really enjoyed his performance overall. My second pro to this movie is the fact that it was a biopic meshed with the jukebox musical genre. I definitely know I've seen a good number of the TV spots for Rocketman, and I'm pretty sure I did watch the trailer, although it had been a while before I went to go watch the movie, and I do not remember them playing up the fact that there were full-blown musical numbers in the movie. Obviously, I heard music in the trailers, but I just figured the way music was going to be portrayed was going to be the way it's normally portrayed in any of these musical biopics. Like, we would see the singer performing the song on stage or recording the song in the studio. I didn't know it was going to be a full-blown musical. But even though that was the case, I still thoroughly much enjoyed it. It definitely felt like I was watching a musical biopic. The most recent musical biopic, Bohemian Rhapsody, or even some other musical biopics like Straight Outta Compton or Ray or Selena. They were definitely hitting the same story beats, but what I felt like separates Rocketman from the rest of those biopics is they utilized the music of the artists and made those into really fantastic musical numbers that kind of actually reminded me of Across the Universe in a way, because a lot of it was grounded in fantasy. The musical numbers, for the most part, and as they should, moved the plot forward, and it gave us emotional insight into the characters in a fun and creative way. That also allowed the movie to utilize more of Elton John's music, which I thought was really smart. My third pro to this movie is the really clever setup. The context of this movie is really set in rehab, and Elton John is telling his life story in front of his fellow rehab attendees, if you will. In my opinion, by setting up the context of the movie with Elton telling his story to us, it makes sense for him to have an exaggerated fantasy way of looking at his own life. Throughout the movie, you see tons of like surrealist moments slash musical numbers that are not necessarily grounded in reality, and there's this understanding that you have as an audience member that you can't take everything you're watching literally. Like the fact that some songs are sung in the movie don't necessarily align with the timeline of Elton John's life. Or other obvious scenes like Elton John performing Rocketman in one of his concerts and then suddenly transforming into a rocket ship. Like, clearly you can't take that literally. So I think by setting up the movie in that really clever way of Elton John owning his own story, it kind of frees this biopic of this responsibility to stay true to the normal trappings and responsibilities that a biopic has to concern itself with, like making sure everything is happening in the exact order that it happened. My fourth pro to this movie is the way that the friendship between Elton John and Bernie Taupin was portrayed. Elton John and Bernie Taupin were musical writing partners. Bernie was in charge of the lyrics while Elton would come up with the melody, and then together they would make these like really wonderful, iconic songs. And aside from being creative work partners, they were also just really, really good friends. And I feel like that closeness was really portrayed well in this movie, and it's in large part because of the chemistry between Taron Egerton and Jamie Bell, who plays Bernie Taupin in the film. Jamie Bell was another one of the actors in this movie that gave one of my favorite performances, because I feel like he had such an earnest steadiness portrayal of Bernie Taupin. When you think about the craziness of Elton John's life as a rock star, especially in the 70s, he needed someone like Bernie to kind of like keep it real with him, to kind of make him feel grounded, to remind him of who he was before he became this big mega rock star. One of the standout scenes for me between Jamie Bell and Taron Egerton is when Elton and Bernie are like hanging out on the rooftop of their apartment, and you can tell that there's like this bond that's really forming between the two guys. And Elton tries to make a move on Bernie and he tries to kiss him, but Bernie kind of like backs away a little bit, and then he tells Elton, you know, I love you, but not like that. That scene for me just really stood out, because there's so many movies and shows whenever you see a gay character come on to a straight character, and then the straight character would get mad at the gay character, would make that gay character feel really, really ashamed, and it's just like, ugh, it's very awkward, and you just feel very uncomfortable. But I loved the way that Bernie let Elton down slowly. He didn't make him feel ashamed at all. He never makes Elton John feel ashamed at all for being gay, but he just let him know, you know, I'm not into that sort of thing, but I still love you anyways. It was so refreshing, and it just speaks largely to the friendship bond and respect that Elton and Bernie had for one another. And my fifth pro, and my obvious fifth pro, is the fact that this movie did not shy away from any of the sensitive, controversial topics. Obviously, in this movie, Elton John makes it very, very clear he's a gay man, and they do not shy away from showing scenes of Elton kissing and also having sex with different men. They also do not shy away from showing Elton getting heavily involved with drugs and a medley of different prescription pills. That was a reality of Elton John's life, and I'm happy that they stayed authentic to his story, because for me, it's like if you're going to tell the life story of anybody, especially any of these iconic musicians, you might as well stay true to the story. And if you're not going to portray the truth, or at least try to portray the truth, what's the point in telling the story? So I'm glad that the movie stayed true to the essence of Elton John's life in that way. All right, now to the con. So con number one for me, and this was like a huge con, is the fact that the last third of the movie is so unevenly paced. You know when you're sitting in a movie theater and you could like feel the audience kind of like get restless? I could feel that as we were in the last third of this movie. I know that the addiction issues that Elton John was dealing with was a very large part of his life, and I'm so happy he was able to get the treatment he needed to help overcome those issues, but I felt like the movie spent way too long on that portion of his life, to the point where it felt like when we were in that last third of the movie, it would be like 3 lines of dialogue and then a full-blown musical number. And then we would get like 2 lines of dialogue and then back to the musical number. It also kind of felt repetitive because they kept circling around the fact that he needs help because his life is going to shit. And then as far as the ending is concerned too, like it felt like for me it just stopped and came out of nowhere. I was like, wait, what? They show Elton John getting out of rehab, and then he breaks out into song recreating the music video for I'm Still Standing, and then it's over and you see, oh, this is what Elton John is doing now. This is him and Bernie. They've still never fought, and Elton John was able to find love. Just the way that they show the ending, again, like, I don't know, it just felt so like, well, it's over. Get out of the theater. I don't know. I just felt like the last third of the movie was just really unevenly paced. My second con for this movie, and I know I said something very similar to this in the pros, but I think this also kind of works against the movie to a certain extent, is the fact that you can't necessarily take everything you're watching quite literally. If you're someone who is after the hardcore facts, like these were the albums that he made, or these were the records that he broke, or these were the awards that he won, this is not that kind of movie. If you want to watch that kind of movie, go watch a documentary or do a nice Google search. But if you're thinking that you're going to walk away from this biopic having learned like very rigid, cold hard facts about Elton John, you're not necessarily going to get that from this movie. In terms of the representation of hard facts, it's all kind of vague in the movie. You see that time is clearly progressing in the movie, but you never really know the exact year. Like you get the sense, oh, we're in the 60s or the 70s or even the 80s based on how these people are dressing, but you never really quite know. And additionally, again, like I said, they don't really explicitly mention like, oh, this is the album that Elton's working on, or they don't really name specific records that he's breaking. Although there is one part in the movie where it's kind of funny because you could definitely tell it's a moment of exposition where Elton is walking backstage at one of his concerts and he's like, oh, I'm responsible for like 10% of the music industry or something like that. That's kind of like the hard facts section of the movie, but in general, those pieces of information are kind of vague. So in a way, that's kind of a con for the movie, but you know, it is what it is. And for me, my third personal con for this movie is Tiny Dancer. So Tiny Dancer for me is like arguably my favorite Elton John song. I absolutely love and adore that song. Whenever I teach ballet, I always use Tiny Dancer as the song for pliés. Like I love Tiny Dancer. And it's also in large part because of Almost Famous, but I digress. Tiny Dancer is one of my favorite Elton John songs, and as soon as like the melody started, I was like, oh, we're here, it's happening. And then I also heard it in the trailer too, and I just felt like I didn't really like the arrangement of the song itself. Felt like you could really hear the auto-tune on that song especially. And in terms of how they use that song in the movie, like I guess it makes sense because they show Elton singing this song as he is watching Bernie getting with this girl, groupie, whatever, at this party, and Elton's like sad because he's alone, and then he starts singing Tiny Dancer, and the lyrics make sense to what's happening. I don't even know how they would have been able to use that song in a different context, but I was just kind of underwhelmed with the use of that song, and I just was not a fan of the arrangement. So that's just a personal con for me. Alright, so my overall rating for this movie is an A-. Even though the last third was so unevenly paced to the point where it was kind of distracting, I still think overall this was a very fun, entertaining, and enjoyable movie. I so appreciate its atypical approach to the music biopic genre by allowing the subject to tell his own story with his own songs via the jukebox musical format. The film's courage to not shy away from sensitive topics honors Elton John's life for all its ups and downs, and thus makes us not only appreciate the artist but also the man himself that much more. And personally, as someone who is a huge stan of artists who unfortunately are no longer here, I'm just happy that Elton really made it through and was alive for this moment. Like, it's just so nice to see, especially when you see Elton and Taron doing the press junkets together. I'm just like, wow. But what a moment. What a moment I'll never forget. And alright, that's about it for this video. If you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and please turn on the notification button down below so you know when a new video from me comes out, and comment down below your thoughts on Rocketman. And also let me know if you're a huge Elton John fan and if you've seen it, because I'm really interested to hear the hardcore Elton John fans' thoughts on the movie. Additional question for you guys, let me know what musical artist, rock star, singer, rapper, musician, what have you, would you like to see a biopic about? If you're new to this channel, I'm a very huge Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson stan. I don't know if I would necessarily want a movie biopic about their lives. Maybe like a limited series, but I don't know about a movie. So let me know which musician, singer, artist, rapper, what have you, would you like to see a biopic about next? As always, everything I said was just my own personal thoughts and all my humble opinion, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!